Good evening, everybody. It's nice that you showed up in such significant numbers because it's such nice weather outside. So it gives me hope that people are interested in issues of societal importance more than having good time. I should guide you through this evening. My name is Tomáš Hříbek. This will be conducted fully in the English language, including questions from, possible questions from the audience later. So let me just give you a brief schedule of the following roughly 90 minutes. What follows will be a brief introduction of Professor Mark Coeckelbergh, then followed by his lecture, roughly 40-45 minutes. That will be followed by a Q&A period of I don't know, 15-20 minutes. And then we will introduce and baptize, I don't know, I don't like to use that term, a book that's just come out, one of Professor Coeckelbergh's books that just come out in Czech translation, and then a brief introduction of a team, because Professor Coeckelbergh actually happens to be of a research team that's been established recently at the Institute of Philosophy here, but more about that later. So let me just briefly introduce Professor Coeckelbergh, who is, while originally hails from Belgium, has been for last decade or so professor of philosophy at the University of Vienna, full professor of philosophy at the University of Vienna, professor of media and philosophy of media and technology, and he's a very prolific author. To date, I believe 17 or 18 books. I'm not quite sure about the current number because he's so prolific that it's difficult to keep up. New volumes might be in the works or coming up soon, but roughly almost like, 20 books, roughly speaking, mostly in, I guess, widely defined area which he helped pioneer in the last couple of decades of philosophy of technology, modern philosophy of technology, especially philosophy of so-called emergent technology, such as artificial intelligence, robotics, and such. And I mean, you would be amazed if you when you're going to read this book, but then, other books in his area, how he's able to bring resources from diverse areas in philosophy, such as philosophy of language, ethics, normative ethics, cultural history in his book Romantic Cyborgs. In addition to emergent technologies, you will learn about 19th century romanticism, and you will find out that according to Professor Coeckelbergh, by and large, we still live in the 19th century as far as our attitudes to technology are concerned. Exaggerating a little bit. So he's a very prolific author, and recently, in his most recent publications, in the last few books, he's been especially tackling the area of ethics of new technologies, especially the ethics of artificial intelligence and politics of artificial intelligence. And while the book that will be introduced later concentrates mostly on ethics of artificial intelligence, today's talk will tackle both ethics and politics of artificial intelligence in order to, I guess, to present the latest or current views and research of Professor Coeckelbergh. So without any further ado, please, Mark.
So thank you, Thomas, for this kind introduction, also introduction to the book. Thank you for overseeing the translation of this book. Also thanks to the translator. who I believe is here this afternoon. And I'm honored to speak here in the Czech Academy of Sciences. Also, not only as author and speaker, but also as era chair of CETE-P in the Institute of Philosophy here within the Academy of Sciences. And I'm very much looking forward to get to know you and to engage with what's happening here in Czech Republic and in Prague in the area of thinking about technology, policy of technology also. So this is a good opportunity, I think, to talk about these matters. Let me start with the presentation. So basically, for me, artificial intelligence and more generally also digital technologies is of course about technologies, it's technical matters. It's about software, it's about data and so on, but it's also about narratives, about stories. It's about ideas that people have about these technologies. And as a philosopher and humanities person, I'm also interested in these narratives, in these different ways of talking about technology and in also the imaginations that there are both in philosophy and in the arts, for example, about the future of the technologies. The way I approach specifically the ethics of technology comes from a broader context of thinking about technology academically called philosophy of technology. I wrote a book to introduce this field, and within that I have focused on normative questions, the ethics of technology, which is ethics of AI, for example, and this book is a translation of that book, and more recently, more the political side of artificial intelligence. And today I will talk a bit about both, but since I moved more in the political direction, I will emphasize these political sides of technology. So what I do in the ethics book is to first talk about these narratives about AI. I talk, for example, about transhumanist narratives of AI, saying that they may distract from the actual problems we have today. And this is again very relevant today when there are many calls from transhumanist side for looking at AI as a kind of existential risk for humanity. I think this is a distraction. This is a very particular narrative that's linked to other narratives about the future of humanity. And so in the book, first contextualize AI within these narratives. I also raise the questions about what is then the difference between humans and machines, and some philosophy about that. And then I go into the normative issues, into issues, for example, one issue, I won't go through all of them, you see them on the slides, but one issue that interested me always already as a philosopher is responsibility. And in the area of digital technology and technologies in general, there's always the issue that technology is created, developed by many hands, by many people, and it's also used in different stages often. For example, artificial intelligence, if we use a particular algorithm or train a particular algorithm, then this is based on data, and these data have been created by people at some point, often another point in time, another context. So I think if we want to deal with normative issues related to responsibility, who is responsible when something goes wrong with artificial intelligence, for example, then we have to look at that history and we have to look at that social context. Because again, technology is not just that technology. Technology is a narrative. Technology is also all the humans connected to these technologies. One question that I added to the discussion here is also the question, to whom are we responsible when we talk about technology? And then we have to talk about the consequences of technology, consequences which are often unintended. So the intended consequences is what, for example, a company tells you the technology is for. For example, the claim is that AI will make your life easier. You can use ChatGPT, for example, to write research proposals in academia, for example. And this is something that a company will say, like, yeah, you can use our product for that purpose. But apart from that, the technologies always have the unintended consequences, and it's there often that the ethical problems arise. For example, when in that case people get addicted to a particular chatbot and things go wrong because they believe it's a kind of human being they are talking to, and they really take seriously what the bot says and take decisions about their life on the basis of that. So there are various problems, and some of the ethical problems that I discuss in the book also have this societal dimension. For example, the future of work, which raises all kind of long-standing philosophical questions about meaning of our lives in the end, and first the meaning of work. For example, if machines would really be able to take over our work, and we would have free time, would that be a good thing? Do we want a life without work? What does it mean? And if that doesn't happen, which I think it doesn't, so every automation technology, the promise is always we will have a kind of leisure society, we will be able to do other meaningful things. It doesn't happen. Instead, what happens often is that we have more work, and we have a very hectic life because of the technologies. Think about the smartphones, think about emails. Also there, the claim was like, instead of sending letters, which take a long time, email goes fast, and it goes very fast. But then you don't only have 1, 2, 3 emails a day, you have maybe 100 emails, 500 emails, 1,000 emails. So this is a problem. These are, I think, interesting questions also to ask at the societal level about the more the link with the environment. I'm now member and part of the leading team of CETE-P. We are thinking about environmental and technological issues, the nexus of these two. Well, one question that one can ask in this area is, should we have human-centered digital technologies, human-centered AI? Or should we also think beyond the human? Should we think about environmental problems, planetary problems? Our animals also, should they count ethically and politically? So I try to also open up that debate. I also put things in a global context and ask, for example, should AI ethics be a global priority, given that there are other problems, for example, in development countries? What should be the priority? How can AI also help to solve global problems, for example, climate change? But how can AI also be a problem itself for that? So I think it's good to also put things in a global context next to, of course, national context and local context. Now, what I've done the past years is to go more into the area of the politics of AI. And there, my point was not so much to bring the resources of ethics, but the resources of political philosophy to the discussion. Political philosophy that, of course, always asks questions about the societal consequences and tries to evaluate these consequences. And these questions can be about political principles, for example, freedom or liberty, equality, justice, democracy, power. These are all concepts we have, and there is already a long history of thinking about these concepts within political philosophy. And my point is here that AI and other digital technologies raise these questions again. And this is what I want to zoom in a little bit today. So if we look at the impact of AI on these political principles and problems, one could look, for example, at freedom. And freedom can be treated in many different ways. You can have the formal freedom that is in constitutions, for example. But what I think politically we should be interested in as philosophers and not as legal experts is what this freedoms means in practice. And then we see, I think, two different threats to freedom from these technologies. One has to do with what Isaiah Berlin called negative freedom. Negative freedom is about not being interfered with by others or by the state, for example. So it's about freedom as many people usually understand it, like leave me alone, let me do my thing, I decide about things I want to do, I want to freely move around, for example. And this kind of freedom is threatened when we have new possibilities with AI for surveillance, for law enforcement, when there's possibilities of predictive policing, for example, with AI, the analysis of statistical data, basically, right, automated with the software, it can be predicted how much probability there is of crime in a particular area of a big city. And so that raises all kinds of questions. What are you going to do? Well, one thing you can do as a police force is saying we have limited resources, we concentrate most of the resources in these areas, so massive police presence in these areas. But the question is, as a political philosopher then, is this justified? Is it justified that, you know, in these areas you find so much police that you have a lot of checkpoints perhaps, or something like this? Or is it justified if you think that a crime will happen to arrest someone? Most of us think, no, it's not justified. But the point is that these technologies really enable all this. And how much legal but also moral and political barriers are there, should there be, against these infringements of negative liberty? That's one important question. Now, there's also positive liberty, and there's discussion in political philosophy what that means, but how I define it is that it has to do with the autonomy over your own life and more the internal control you have over your desires and wishes. And then there's a problem in that sense that the new technologies enable other people, companies, state, and so on, to influence your choices, your desires, your beliefs. And a good way to illustrate that is, for example, Amazon, where you have, where you want, for example, to buy my book AI Ethics in the Czech version or the English version, and the program will say people who bought this book also bought the political philosophy of AI. In this case, this nudging is entirely justified, of course, but there might be cases when this is problematic. And yeah, what is the problematic aspect of this is that it's not about persuasion by argument. It's not about arguing why, for example, a book is better or why a particular choice is better. It's about influencing under the radar of the conscious, rational choice. It's directly targeting all the psychological mechanisms that are there to change our beliefs, our choices. And this can also be used, for example, in the political arena to influence our choices for political parties when we vote. So all these possibilities for manipulation create, I think, these problems at different levels, the negative liberty, but also circumvention of positive liberty. And I think this is a problem because it is treating people as instruments, as things to be manipulated. And of course, this happened before already. But now the point is that these technologies are a very powerful instrument to do that, and the question is how much barriers are there then from big companies, from state to not do that. Equality and justice are two other important concepts that can be impacted by AI. There is a famous problem of bias in AI. For example, facial recognition systems that only recognized in the beginning only people with a white skin color. It's also used in courts AI, and then there were problems with that. For example, that black defendants had comparatively more chance to be labeled as too dangerous to leave prison. There was also issues in financial credit scoring. So if you let AI decide about who gets credit and who not, based on postcode, for example, well, it can be that you live in an area with a particular postcode, but actually you are very creditworthy. You have enough. It's normally no problem to get a loan, but just because you live in that area of the city, AI says statistically the probability is high that you will not repay your loan, so you don't get a loan. So there could be all kind of issues about fairness, about justice. And what I say in the book then is that an important question to ask from political philosophy is, why is it unfair? Why is it biased? Why is it not fair, for example, that a person doesn't get the loan? Well, then we get to all kind of theories about justice and fairness. There are more liberal universalist ones that say, like, regardless of social position and group, we should treat everyone equally, for example, or assume that everyone could be in the worst position. But there are also other theories. For example, there's Marxist perspectives that more question the socio-economic system and say we should look at what kind of socio-economic classes people are and look at the class struggle there. One could also look at different identities and group membership and talk about justice in that way, say that some groups are more disadvantaged historically, for example, and therefore we should, instead of treating everyone equally, we should treat them better than others. And so all this is up for discussion. All this can be discussed, like, what is the best theory, what is a fair way of treating people. But that's often not done in the current discussion. Someone shouts it's biased, but it's not clear why is it biased, what exactly are the consequences, and what is the justification for saying that something is fair or not. So that's important. Democracy is also an important term. I'm currently working on that. One way to talk about this is to warn for totalitarianism. Why totalitarianism? Well, AI, of course, can also have some positive contributions to democracy, but support of authoritarian technocracy is possible once you see that AI in combination with social media can lead to, again, manipulation, as I explained, but also polarization, that people go to more extreme views and also, in the end, like, stay in their own bubble, stay in their own world of opinions that agree with them and don't consider other opinions and don't discuss with others. And behind that is also, again, political philosophy, because there are different ideas of what democracy is. If you think democracy is just about voting, then there are these kind of possibilities for informing people and organizing voting by means of all kind of electronic technologies. If you think that democracy is also about discussing with one another, deliberation, then there's a big question mark, because then there are these problems, and the question then is, can AI also contribute to democracy? Is it a threat to democracy? So problems of misinformation, for example, right? So if you have a more rich ideal of democracy that asks of citizens to participate in making the laws, in organizing society, then you need also citizens that are informed. But what if we have fake news? What if we have misinformation? One particular academic way I worked on this was to say people have less epistemic agency when AI is used for the manipulation of beliefs, because normally we want to form our own beliefs. It's a bit analogous to the autonomy problem. But what if AI is used to manipulate those beliefs based on our data? This is this academic article. So yeah, there is more and more danger also for totalitarianism with these infringements of negative liberty. There's also the possibility to use AI for repression, and this is not all fantasies in contrast to these transhumanist narratives. China, for example, does this already with AI, repression of certain groups, which also can be done without AI, but again, AI offers these enormous possibilities to, in a very targeted way, in a way that spreads immediately, to put people under surveillance, and then of course do things to them. So I'm worried about AI as contributing to what Hannah Arendt called the origins of totalitarianism. And my point is not, again, that AI by itself does this, but it's AI in combination with a particular context. And if we see today that there are contexts in which particular forms of populism and authoritarianism flourish, if you then add AI in a society that is already not very resilient against authoritarianism, then we have a problem, and I think we do have. So that is another danger, if you like. Power is another concept from political philosophy that can be used to discuss the political impact of AI. All these examples of dangers of totalitarianism is, of course, the exercise of power over citizens. New possibilities of surveillance, from already 18th, 19th century to today. But with AI possible, the idea here, the panopticon, that you don't know if you're being watched, and this itself disciplines you. This itself is already a form of control. Because if you think I might be watched, you're going to behave. For example, if you're somewhere in a public building or in a hotel and you see a camera, and imagine that you're in a particular mood to not behave, for example, tourists in Prague, but you see the camera, you're going to think twice before you do it. And so you adapt your behavior, and you may not do it. So that is, of course, a form of disciplining, what Foucault called disciplining. And I think that today this is even, not only possible by AI, but is even more relevant because people themselves also engage in self-disciplining by having all kinds of apps on their phone which take data and which enable companies and potentially also the state to engage in forms of surveillance. Is this always bad? Well, during the pandemic, for example, this kind of methods were used, right? So surveillance is not only bad, there can be a positive side to it, but how far should it go? How far is, again, this infringements of liberty, this exercise of power, justified? And then we get again to political philosophy, of course. So I find it interesting that people themselves contribute to this. I wrote about that in the context of critical thinking about self-improvement culture. And yeah, I think this is an interesting direction also for further research. Then, as I said, there are also questions that have to do with the borders of the political, one could say. So again, yeah, is AI contributing to the continued humanity that puts itself always in the center, normatively speaking, humanity that says, like, ethically and politically speaking, we are the center, we are the most valuable, the most important, and so on? Or can we also imagine a different way of dealing with non-human nature, with non-human animals, and so on? So I think there's a question that at least should be asked: how anthropocentric should politics be? Also AI politics, because technology, the question of technology has a lot to do with that. How do we, technology can also be defined, for example, as a transformation of nature. Well, but how should we do that? Should we continue in this modern and anthropocentric way, or are there other possibilities that we should seriously explore? There are lots of ideas about this, especially in environmental philosophy, for example, also more and more in political philosophy, but in practice we see that this is not really explored in practice. So yeah, I think something to keep in mind. And yeah, in terms of academic sources, there is environmental ethics, there's also post-humanist ontologies. I will not go in detail here, but it's possible to think about humans and their environment in a much more relational way than we normally tend to do. And I think for AI politics and generally for politics, that yeah, is a challenge. What kind of role could technology play in a different kind of world, in a world where we don't put ourselves necessarily in the center? This is the more later questions. So to conclude, I've given an overview of some risks and dangers connected to AI, but not always AI just itself, but AI always linked to that political and social context. I think there are dangers in terms of impact on basic principles. Basic principles, by the way, such as freedom, equality, that also since the French Revolution have been seen as the basis of democracy. And yeah, I think we should ask questions about knowledge. What kind of knowledge do citizens need for democracy to work, and what is the impact of AI on this? And then finally, I've asked questions about inclusion, which is not also about humans, of course, and questions about justice and bias related to that, but it's also about, I think, about non-humans, about the environment. So I think for me, I think AI is experiencing a spring or a summer, probably a spring or something. Technical people spoke about AI winter when AI was not so popular and AI development was not going so fast. Now, of course, we experience the opposite. I think this gives a lot of opportunities. We should not, sometimes AI ethics is too negative, too reactive and too doom thinking like. So there are lots of opportunities, but I think then we should get the narratives right. We should deal with the ethical issues, respect those basic political principles, try to see how AI and other digital technologies can contribute to democracy rather than eroding it. Yeah, discuss this in a context where we think about what the political is, where the borders of the political are. And I think this can and should be done by everyone in a way. I mean, it should be a democratic discussion, a public discussion. And then we can think again of what we need for that. We need, of course, education, and we also need research. So more research is needed in philosophy and interdisciplinary work on this. And for example, CETE-P here at the Institute of Philosophy and the Academy is one way to do that, one way to contribute. if you like more on the ethics of AI, then now this book is available in Czech translation, as Thomas already said. If you like more on the political side, then the political philosophy of AI with Polity Press is out already since last year. And then, please, for those interested in the intersection between environmental ethics and technology ethics, have a look at CETE-P, our new center. I think we can say more about that soon. But I think I will close my lecture here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Now we will have a question and answer period. I think we can take 20. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. I was just going to do that. Thank you. So Peter might go around the room and people might use the microphone to ask Mark questions.
Hi, my name is Tim and I study at the Charles University. I'd like to ask you, dear Mark, what do you think about the open letter that was published by the Future of Life Institute and about the pause, 6-month pause of AI research? What do you think about that, and would you have signed it perhaps?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would not have signed it, and I did not sign it. I think first of all, I think to call for a ban of something is quite a big infringement on liberty and should be better justified, I think. It's also a way of thinking about ethics that's quite binary in the sense that you have either you ban something or you have something. I think we can have a more smart way of regulating AI. But my main criticism of the letter is that it comes from those people who give that narrative of this doom thinking that AI is going to take over and going to destroy the world and things like that. And I think that's not the right kind of ethics that we need today. We need to talk about ethics in a different way. That being said, of course, I'm happy when people of big companies are open to talk about ethics. I'm just afraid that what we see is often, on the one hand, that they get rid of their ethics teams or are very difficult towards them, and on the other hand, make them these gross claims. So I'm very critical of that particular letter and also of further claims made, for example, by the CEO of OpenAI.
And would you mind expanding a little bit on that criticism you mentioned? You criticized the apocalyptic narrative, let's say. Would you mind expanding on that?
Yeah, I think the apocalyptic narrative supposes that AI becomes super intelligent and then gets out of human control. And if you see what AI is and does, I think we should take seriously that it has a huge impact on the world. But AI is not this autonomous thing, and it's not doesn't have general intelligence and won't have it as far as we know in the near future. I also think, as a philosopher, that it will never be. But we can discuss about that, like what are the criteria for that. But even disregarding that, I think in the near future we need to not so much think about will AI become super intelligent and what are the dangers then, but what is AI already doing now? What are the possibilities in the near future in terms of its ethical and societal impact? And there make good policies, there regulate and also try to develop already AI in a way that regulation later is not needed, that AI is already ethically and politically developed and innovated in a responsible way.
Hi, I'm Hanna Kalivodova. I'm director of Czech Effective Altruism. And I would like to follow up on this and ask if that means that you don't believe in the instrumental convergence, and that it doesn't mean it's not important if the intelligence will be general.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I do believe that technologies are converging and will converge. I do think that it's good to think about AI not only in isolation but also with other technologies. I also do think that it's a correct assumption that there is a lot of a rapid development of the technologies, so we need to think about that, especially how to react to it in an ethical and political way, because ethics and politics tends to be slower. So there are, I think, some problems that are brought up by this, but I think, yeah, I don't believe in the particular narrative of effective altruism. I think combined with this long-termism especially, that it can be problematic because it can downplay the current interests of humans on Earth in favor of imagined super intelligent entities in the future.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
My name is Christina and I work in responsible AI at PwC here. And my question is about your opinion on the political side of things, or rather political economy. So given the impact that generative AI like ChatGPT can have on employment, and given the fact that it has been created based on the work of numerous people who created the content on the internet, do you envision research, or do you already have opinions about the taxation of ChatGPT or similar tools and the economic power imbalances that it will create?
Yeah, excellent question. I think that it's true that the development of AI in the current way, in a non-open way, in spite of the name of that particular company, for example, indeed means that resources of the commons in a way are used for private gain, and this is already known in political philosophy as a problem, and one way to solve it, the radical way to solve it, is to say that in a society that depends so much on these technologies, one should have public ownership of infrastructure and technologies. But this is a very radical view. One can also have other views that are more in congruence with how we do things now in many European countries, that we regulate and we tax indeed, or have all kind of instruments that make sure that some of the benefits also flow back to society, so that there's not only a taking just for private gain for the happy few, but also for all of us. And I think that that's really important, and I don't have particular policy proposals for this, but I think there's the kind of space for me as a philosopher to discuss how much should we regain from the technologies also for the whole of society and for the common good.
Hello, name is Jakub. I coordinate One Horizon Europe within the Human 0101. And I really liked your talk and how non-denominational it was. But I was wondering whether you actually have some suggestions, right? Like we can define fairness and the ethics of AI in the Rawlsian sense, in the Marxist sense, in the identitarian sense. But ultimately, if there is a policy to be had, it has to somehow relate to one of those schools of thought and then somehow implement this. Or it can sort of be 1/3 Marxist and 1/3, right? Yeah. But ultimately, do you have some sort of policy suggestions in that direction? Like sort of we live in a society which is not very Marxist, and the European Commission doesn't subscribe to the Marxist ideals, and hence it should sort of go down with the Rawlsian ideals, or right? I think I would be very keen on your take on how does this view translate to policy?
So that's a very good question. So I think that given the fact that there's so much difference in different contexts, people think differently about what justice and fairness is, and that can be linked to these different theories. I think it's important that we have the public and democratic decision-making about these things, and that it's not just the experts and the philosophers that tell us what to do. I think that to me, goes too much in the authoritarian direction, where you have the philosopher kings, the guardians, that tell what to do. On the other hand, we need experts, and if I, as a AI ethics expert, would, what would you do in policy? I would say that from, influenced by pragmatist philosophy, that we should recognize the plurality of values related to these different theories, and that, it can be, you can have a policy that recognizes that certain groups are more marginalized than others, or are less advantaged than others. You can have policies that still give everyone a basic level of liberty, inspired by the universalists. So but I think in practical policy making, it's not a good idea to say like, oh, this theory is the truth, and now we're going to apply it. So I think there's a plurality of values here and considerations. And I wouldn't say that one of the theories is totally wrong or something. But we need to discuss this, and also as academics, of course. So by defending a particular theory and then having different views, we can also maybe get a bit further and see the strengths of certain theories and views rather than others. So I think philosophers in that way can contribute, of course, to the debate. Can also, like I try to do, a bit clarify the lines. What is this about? That's also one role that philosophy can have. So that's why it's good, I think, to have this public philosophy component also in academia, and have it also supported by universities and other academic institutions.
May I just intersperse with my own question, because it's related to this last gentleman's question about the implications, the actual offshoots of the discussion in your book on political philosophy of AI. So I apologize for interrupting, but it's this, that like one way of reading that book is, I might read it as an overview of basic concepts and debates relating to that concepts in standard sort of Western political philosophy of the last half century, right? Freedom, equality, justice, democracy, power, so that would be, I guess, one way of reading it, and it's helpful and everything, as these debates are impacted by the introduction of AIs. But you do, of course, not only that, you take more or less definite positions on each of these issues. So you are for expansion of freedom rather than limitation of freedom. You are for more equality rather than less. You're for democracy rather than totalitarianism, for maybe limiting, disciplining powers rather than expanding them. And all of that, so it's not just an overview of issues, it's, you're taking these definite positions, but all of these positions that you are taking, I guess in some are kind of unobjectionable, West European, let's say, liberal democratic or democratic liberal position, maybe somewhat left of center, but it doesn't strike me as radical. So the question is this, is there any particular issue or concept on which you feel in that book, in your thinking on political philosophy, you are departing from mainstream and you are going in a radical direction? Is there any of that?
Yeah, thanks for the questions. First of all, Western, I am also interested, of course, because I have this more contextual, I think there's a contextual dimension to ethics and politics. I think it's, in a global perspective, it's good to also look at how other countries and cultures deal with things. And I also wrote a foreword to a volume on African philosophy of AI and things like this. So that is one note. But also, it's true that there is, of course, normative views in there. I wanted to reach a lot of people, and I also talk a lot about views that are shared by many people. But in my books where I talk about particular issues like freedom and democracy, I do go in more radical directions, or at least more pronounced directions. And for example, in the freedom book, Green Leviathan, I do defend views of freedom that connected to human flourishing. I also go some way in the Marxist direction, in the sense that I say that there will be probably some kind of class struggle around climate. There will be climate classes, and how do we deal with that? So I do sometimes go further. And also in my current writings on democracy, there's more, for example, emphasis on the common good, which is not a concept that everyone would use. And so I think that I do in writings go further.
I just wanted people to hear that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Here. Hi, I'm Emil Kindle from Atlantic Technological University, Sligo, and you mentioned AI bias as one of the problems of AI, but we also should mention that humans also have some kind of inherent bias. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you a question. Don't you think that it will be actually easier to regulate AI bias than to regulate human bias?
Yeah, I mean, I think both are, of course, a challenge, but it's true that human bias is also a problem. And for example, if you take the sphere of the more legal sphere, it's known, for example, that judges have certain biases even based on some biological factors. And so I think it's a very interesting area. It's partly also then, again, used by people who want to manipulate, but it's also from a critical point of view important to recognize that and to see how then technologies could also help to work against these biases. However, there is a danger that AI is seen as objective, as politically neutral, as you know, wiping out all the human biases. And then we are again in the utopian sphere, and also in the sphere of seeing AI just as a technology and an instrument. And the point in the book of the political philosophy of AI is exactly that AI is not politically neutral. And that we have to look all these issues that are connected with also the technical. But of course, we should not pretend that humans don't have biases, for sure. Yeah.
Hi, here.
Yeah.
My name's Adam. I've just graduated high school, and my question would be rather for a different topic, but it would be, how do you think AI can affect children and their development, and could it possibly be beneficial for them, but how should we regulate it so that it does not get out of hand?
Yeah, very, very good question. First of all, it reminds me, of course, of the fact that ethics and political philosophy is often assumes that we're talking about the adults. For example, I talked about autonomy. This is all about autonomous adults, a specific kind of adults even, and that excludes some other humans. Yeah? And we probably talk much too little about children. Now, one of the discussions there, I think, is also like how to do parenting, how to be a teacher in these times when the new tools are available, like ChatGPT, but also in times where these technologies have such powerful influence on the life world of young people and children. So I think that's something that I think many of us are somehow affected by, directly or indirectly, and it's also important to ask this in the context of the education. If we want a kind of civic education, if we want the education of people for good democratic citizenship, then I think we cannot start from the adults when they are already developed. We have to start from the children, without, of course, doing what authoritarian regimes have done and so on. But to think about like what kind of education do they need in terms of what kind of skills do they need? For example, let them learn to discuss about certain views without attacking the person. It's something that we learn in philosophy, and some philosophers are not very good at it, even later in life. They often go ad hominem to, they criticize the person instead of the view. But to learn it is so important in democracy, because otherwise you don't have this openness. Then you already start the competition and the struggle before that you actually know the other's point of view, and that you really can discuss it. So this kind of skill, I think, can already be taught to children. I think we shouldn't underestimate that. And we have to think more about this kind of issues. So their collaboration with people that are specialized in education could be really good. Thank you.
Two more questions. Oh, okay. But so we should have no more. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. There. Okay. Yeah.
Of course, all of us agree that we are being manipulated by many algorithms which have been developed within AI. Mm-hmm. But shouldn't we think also about the responsibility of the society, of all of us? Because each of us know that, as a matter of fact, whenever we are getting something free or getting something without payment, then we are becoming goods. So we are selling our freedom, our data, without thinking, and we are very, very negligent about it. Most of us in this society are trying to ignore this fact, and that's why we should more try, and all people who are knowing more about artificial intelligence should have the responsibility to educate the society for being more cautious. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't this be talked about as well?
Yes, absolutely. So we need to educate individuals, and we need to point to individual responsibility too. But the problem I have with that is that it's a limited approach, if that's the only approach, because we are in these highly technological and mediated environments where there is manipulation, influence, and so on. And it's difficult as an individual to change things. So politically speaking, but also, for example, the issue of informed consent is a good one there. So we have currently the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and the result of that is that we have to, on websites, we have to consent to give our data. Now what happens in practice is everyone has to tick at least some basic functional data or something, but you don't really know what data are taken. And no one reads the declarations and just ticks it. So this is an example of how the ideology of individual consent here doesn't really work in practice, and why we need broader political solutions at a collective level, why we need regulation, and why we cannot only rely on individual responsibility. But of course, to point to people like you can also do something, and you have to be more conscious of what you're doing with your data, is of course one path. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shubhangi and I study films at FAMU. And while discussing democracy, you mentioned something called techno-solutionist approach of AI. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. So for me, techno-solutionism means that there's a problem and you think that technology is going to solve it. So it's the belief of technology, but also the neglect of the more social and political complexities. For example, for me a good example was when Elon Musk wanted a tunnel in California, I believe, to get from one city to another. I think San Francisco and LA, but I don't remember exactly. And for me, this is a typical techno-solutionist kind of thing, because there is a transportation problem, and he solves it. He wants to solve it in a technological way, without seeing that transportation is this very complex problem, has to do with the way we live, the whole way that cities are built, the whole our lifestyles, and indeed technologies, especially the technology of the car, that allows you to live somewhere else, and so you create a commuter problem. And there's a lot to be discussed there, and there's a lot of solutions that are not just at the technological level, but where, first of all, technology itself is part of the problem, and where also political discussions have to be held, for example, about who benefits from the current transportation systems in the US in that case, and who not, and how can we change things. Should transportation be a public good or not? To what extent should it be public good? I think that kind of questions have to be asked, and the techno-solutionist takes the shortcut and wants to have the quick technological solution, and I think that's deeply problematic.
Hi, I'm Martin Matustik. I teach philosophy at Arizona State, but not anymore. I live in Prague now. And when you talk about the ethics and politics of technology, you assume that technology is like a steam engine or a car, something that we use, and AI is a tool in that same way. But what I heard some people writing about, like Noah Yuval Harari, who I don't think is extreme. I think he meditates, he thinks a lot about it, he speaks a lot around the world. But he came up with an article in the New York Times where he raised an issue I haven't heard anywhere else on the AI. And he said that the way we intervene in DNA with infobiotechnology and are becoming producers of evolution rather than products of evolution, and that there is a radical change. The same thing might be happening with us now, that we are creating something with which we will hack our language, which is the basis of foundation of culture, religion, myth, ethics, politics. That is being that can be understood as language. Once you hack language, you don't need mothers and fathers to make you human. Wittgenstein might be saying there is no private language argument. Well, you just have a chat box teach us how to be human. And it's the only instrument that has read all the books. I will never read all the books on the planet. I heard all the symphonies, will see all the movies. None of us will do that. So it will hack the foundation. Is it possible? It's not a question of whether it will become conscious or whatever, but it's totally alien intelligence, like from another planet coming, that we have created.
Okay, thanks for the question. So I think Harari is a great storyteller, and I think there's a lot in his history of humanity that, of course, is taken from books that know what they're talking about. I do not by the more transhumanist part of his story, but I think what is right is that AI, because it's for me non-instrumental, it has this impact at all kind of levels, and I think we will think differently about ourselves. We will also influence the language that's used. For example, what now if kids grow up and always use this kind of machines, then they might actually imitate the language as used by these AI tools. So it will, as always, technologies will change also human language and culture, and in the end will change the human. So the human for me is not an essence, but is indeed more fluent, and that I always agreed with, by the way, with the transhumanists. So I think it's right to say that there will be a huge impact of the technology. I don't agree then about the future visions and so on, but I think it's good to think about that, to think also about AI and language, and I generally also am interested in problems around technology and language. I also wrote on that. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Pavel Juruš from the Institute of Computer Science. In your broad overview, you mentioned concepts like nudging and agency, autonomy, and even now when I go shopping or when I open social media or when I'm asked to cast vote in election, it's a singular person standing engaged against huge technology, which is manipulating me very sophisticatedly, in very sophisticated way to do some decision. And in future, I think we can even question if the free elections are really free, if it continues to be even more and more sophisticated, the campaigns. Do you see any activities or anything like trying to dealing with this problem?
Yeah, so we talked a bit about this influencing and nudging, right? And the reason why I do is that I see that the problem is often not on the table yet. People don't really take it seriously enough as a problem. And I don't see much regulation that really protects citizens and consumers there. So yeah, I'm very much in favor of more attention to these problems, because it will be the combination also between AI and data science on the other hand, then like behavioral economics, empirical psychology. There's a lot going on now that could lead to very effective ways of manipulating people, and yeah. We need more attention to the problem and see how regulation of social media, for example, regulation of internet can help there. And of course, partly also the individual awareness and the skills to deal with that, to keep having a critical attitude, to keep asking what do I really want. Of course, this was already a problem during the mass media of the 20th century, television, radio, and I think now with these AI tools this is much stronger. So yeah, we need to urgently think about that, or what we can actually concretely do about it. There don't have ready recipes for that, but it's good you mentioned this.
Yeah, here, hello, I'm David, good afternoon. I don't know if it will be the right question, since I've been preoccupied in my university mostly of how to draw lines, but and the architecture studies, but considering the ancient Greece democracy as the relation between, based on slavery, actually. Would you call the second half of the 21st century the relation between human and AI also the relation of hegemony and slave?
Okay, yeah, good question. So there's two things here. I think the discussion about democracy, there it's indeed good to be critical, like, you know, what kind of democracy did people actually have? And during a lot of human history, it was always a very small group of people, right, that had the actual power and that had a democracy, and democracy wasn't for the others. So that is important to ask questions about power and justice there. With regard to today, 20th century, 21st century, and AI in particular, you see that that there is this thinking in terms of mastery and slavery when it comes to the relation between humans and machines. Humans always want to be the master, and the machine is basically the slave, is the servant, and often like the Czech word, I believe, robota, is used there, which I think doesn't mean slave, but does mean something like laborer, right? And so there's a whole cultural history where this kind of pattern returns and goes right into the discussion about machines, about robots, about artificial intelligence. So this is definitely one way one can critically look at the problems we have today. I wrote one article that argued that if we have to think about this at all, so first of all saying that it is a dangerous way of always talking about machines should be our slaves, but also if we have to be the masters, that we are kind of tragic masters, because we are the masters that are totally dependent on the technology for our recognition then, and so we get the master is also dependent on the slave and not only opposite. So to think about it from that way can definitely add to the critical discussion about this. Thanks.
I'm Daniel Novotný from University of South Bohemia. I teach philosophy there. Thank you. I really like your description of all the issues that we are dealing with and will be dealing with in near future concerning particular issues, that's called narrow AI, or the issues that we are dealing with now. But there is this second part of your approach, besides the concerns with narrow AI, concerning this AGI, and you have this very dismissive view on that. And so if you could expand what exactly is the problem. One thing I'm hearing is that it somehow draws too much attention, and there is a danger of neglecting the current issues that for sure we have now. But is it all, or is in your view really something impossible or improbable about AGI? And if yes, what kind of impossibility? Is it metaphysical impossibility, logical, physical, technical? So whether you could somehow comment what exactly is your problem with AGI and the ethics of it.
Yeah, so as I suggested before, so I think there can be philosophical reasons to say also like it's not possible, and they're influenced by the direction that says that that minds need to be embodied, and that body is the biological body, and situated also in an environment and being aware of that environment and so on. So there come all kind of terms there, embodied, consciousness, and so on. And I don't see an argument why machines could get a body in any relevant sense, and phenomenologically and in terms of the experience, and why they could get consciousness. Of course, if someone could convince me that this is possible, then we have to we have to consider seriously that possibility. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
I have to look where
big room. Yeah. My name is Marek Havrda. I happen to be Deputy Minister for European Affairs, and in my previous life, I was working with AI startup, and I contributed to AI ethics work of IEEE, OECD, and the last UNESCO. Mm-hmm. I think there is a saying that we tend to underestimate the impact of the technology in the long term, and I think this is very true, and this is even more true for AI, and especially mastering the language as we see it now, and the speed of the improvement is super dangerous. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you as well that we need to now be looking at the issues which are really pertinent and which are already available through the current technology. And manipulation comes to me as kind of the first one. In the Draft AI Act of the EU, there is a ban on manipulation through subliminal techniques. And during the Czech presidency, we try to specify it better. And in the recitals, we have to use the notion of dark patterns, which is the notion developed basically through the work of my colleagues in my previous life in the Commission, working on use of the behavior insights for informing especially consumer policy. I just wonder if you agree with that ban. That's one thing. The other thing, if you think that the definition through dark patterns is good, or there might be some better definitions how to deal with that subliminal approach, which has some reasons we don't have now time to discuss.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, it opens an interesting area also for philosophical questioning about what is exactly happening there, how to define this, because the problem is that with this subliminal influencing, it seems difficult to prove on the side of the experiencing person. So you have to define it in almost technical ways in how the AI is used. So I do think that that can be the only direction, because you cannot really look into someone's head and see what happened there. So, but it creates, of course, for regulation a problem. I do think it's good that there are some red lines in the current AI Act. And if it was, I've been part of this high-level expert group on AI from the European Commission, and if it was up to me and some others, there would have been even more of this kind of lines. I think that one can always question where the balance should have been, but in general, I think it's a good way forward to already have this. I'm just a bit now worried that with this AI Act, when it gets implemented, everything takes quite some time. So, and by that time, we have already other AI, right? So, in general, I think for policy making, I mean, and the high-level expert group was, I think, 2018 to 20, something like this. And so we are talking about years, and this would be good if both at European level, but also at national level, if we had sort of the institutional instruments to play closer on the ball, as we say in my language, to react faster and to be really there when things happen or when the risks are created. So yeah, I would be interested if you have ideas about that, because I always propose that, that we need to change the institutions in such a way that also within still having democracy, but having experts and trying to quickly react, how to do that. Yeah, so that would be, I think, an interesting theme to discuss with you and other policymakers.
All right, thank you for the excellent questions. I guess I can say that. Thank you on behalf of Professor Coeckelbergh for the questions from the audience. So many thoughtful people, and it turns out expert people. I guess, well, after all, I guess it should not be surprising that they would turn up at such an event. Well, now we are not done yet. I mean, the evening is not over yet. So let me remind you of the rest of the program. So I guess at this point I will also thank Professor Coeckelbergh for the lecture and for the answers to the audience, and give him a little bit of break, because we are moving to presentation of the Czech translation of one of Mark's latest books, the translation of a volume from the excellent series published by Massachusetts Institute of Technology, series Essential Knowledge, if you're familiar with these volumes. So Mark, I think unlike any other author so far in the series, contributed 2 books already, right? 2 books. I think every other book every other author had just 1 publication. So this book, which is now available in Czech translation, originally called AI Ethics, is called Etika umělé inteligence in the Czech translation. I guess I wish we had already something like Germans have this CETE-P. They have already settled abbreviation, right? But sometimes I guess in the Czech conversation we use AI, the English abbreviation, sometimes UI, like umělá inteligence, abbreviation of the Czech term. But yeah, and thank you, Mark, for mentioning my editorial input, but it's negligible in comparison with the work that was, of course, carried out by excellent translator Silva Ficová here. If you can please stand up and maybe, I don't know, get a round of applause. Thank you. And Silva already, I mean, this is the first time I'm meeting her myself, although I guess she's already translated several books, maybe 3 books for this series, yeah. of which now Czech translation of Mark's books is part of. And we have some copies of this just published book at the front desk outside of this room, plus other volumes of related interest on issues of, let's say, public morality, philosophy, on issues that is written in as accessible, perfectly accessible, straightforward language like Mark uses in his book. These other authors whose book you will find on the front desk are also written in a similar format. So the format and the language should be, this is, I guess, the must for the choice in this series, should be, it should be brief, succinct, straightforward, accessible to people who are educated, but not necessarily in the jargon of some academic philosophy. So you will find other volumes there. So please, those of you, I understand from the questions that there are a lot of foreign student or exchange students and foreign visitors, as well as, I guess, expats, even some expats. But I'm sure there are also plenty Czech speakers who might appreciate having their own copy of the book. So. We originally thought that we would baptize the book with wine or sect or something, but I refused because the cover is not laminated, and I've been conditioned by my mother that books are sacred and should not be ruined. So we don't do that. Petr, what do you think? Should we consider the book now baptized without the holy water or wine or anything? What do you think, Mark? You tell us.
I think even, I hesitate. I tend to agree with your mother.
Okay. Also, at this point, I guess I should like to invite maybe Mark and other members of the team that he mentioned in his own introduction to his talk, and several times during the talk, that we've founded this research center that is called Center for Environmental and Technology Ethics Prague, and upon consultation of some native English speakers, it was decided that it should be pronounced as CETE-P. Those of you who are native speakers here, expats, students, or whatever, I hope you agree. But it's been already decided, so no change, I guess, is coming from. So I think, I don't know if, I guess I don't need to introduce everyone individually, but let me just say something, and then others can I will pass the mic, but others can butt in. But the idea was that we've noticed at the Institute of Philosophy, right, that there are these ethics centers, especially researching emerging technologies and other, I guess, ethical challenges in contemporary world, including climate change. many of them around the world, right? Especially in Western Europe and in the United States. Every self-respecting, publicly funded or privately funded university have such a center attached to them, or there are private institutions. Technology giants also have these independent, like, ethics research centers. So we thought that in this middle-sized country, right, rather small or middle-sized country, that we need such a research center of our own. And we were thinking about some particular focus that we should choose, because we shouldn't do what other people are doing, so that we can be seen on the map, right? So the first decision was that we need a person that's internationally notorious, well-known researcher, academic, and Mark was so nice to accept the invitation to be part of the team. And then already with him on board, we applied for a large European grant from European Commission that actually enables us to be funded for the next 5 consecutive years. And then Mark had this idea that the focus that we should choose, so that we are visible and we don't do what everybody else is doing, is that we should work on this intersection or interface between ethics of emergent technologies and environmental ethics, or ethics, ecology ethics, environmental ethics. And and this is what he's been pursuing in his last few publications, in last few monographs, and that's what has been decided collectively that we should be pursuing, because not many people are doing that. So, Mark, if you feel that you still want to expand on that, please do.
Yes, I think I can use this microphone still. As you said, Thomas, I thought that this intersection between the two fields, I saw that in academia it's not really worked on sufficiently, whereas in the real world there's constant connections and entanglements between technology and environmental issues. So. I thought this is a good direction to do something that not everyone is doing, and I think the center can provide a space where this is possible here in Czech Republic, but also internationally as one of the places where we can do this kind of new research. So I'm very excited about that. I think it will be interesting to see how the center grows also in the coming years. We will hire people first, and this is very exciting project.
And if I'm No, I don't want to talk about hiring, but actually I want to address this nice audience here just with the message that one of the missions of our center is also to collaborate with local universities, with the general public, and with policymakers. And we organize for this purpose a meeting which will take place in November. It will be the 23rd of November. We call it Environment and Technology Forum, or CETE-P Forum if you want, and everyone will be invited. We will send out invitations for this, and if you feel you have, or your institution which you represent has projects and some interests that connect to what we are doing, so we would really appreciate you just get in touch with us. We will have chance after this talk to be outside also for a small banquet, so please feel free to get in touch with us and tell us if you feel that there are some connections, and we would love to continue and work with you on things where we have some overlaps. This is one thing, and the second is that we are here as godparents of this new translation, so please let me on behalf of our CETE-P team wish the translation the best, and again thanks to to the translator and to the speed and to the publishing house, actually, because the speed of the production was enormous and surprising, so that we managed to have the book now for this talk. And thank you again, everyone, for being here and for participating. And I don't want to make it longer to wait for the refreshments outside, so that was my final. Anybody else feel something new? Okay, so this is it, probably. Thomas, but
yeah, let's continue with the banquet, I guess, outside. Thank you. Thank you.